not anonymous, because he wrote it. No, no, it's cool. It's about like a guy like Banksy. It's about a tagger who does art, guerrilla art.
Graffiti artist. Yeah.
It's very cool.
And he witnesses a murder, and he can't come forward because there's warrants out for his arrest. So.
And has this been published, you said?
No, not yet. HarperCollins read it, and we're actually talking right now, so we'll see what happens.
We'll look forward to that.
More questions?
So this is for Ian. In my experience, the film industry in general is a pretty big pain in the ass to deal with and get into. So could you describe like how you got your first script like bought, you know, how that whole went down?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. I always say, you know, people who aspire to work in the film industry, it's kind of like, you know, aspiring to be an astronaut. I mean, it's that difficult. I was lucky, but also persistent, and I think a lot of people don't have the persistence. A lot of people don't have the work ethic, and I think that's really what's key. I knew somebody who was an executive for a producer named Wendy Feinerman, who produced Forrest Gump, among other movies, and gave me the guy's number. I called him. Of course, he didn't return my calls. I was persistent. Eventually, I got a hold of him. He was kind of a dick on the phone. He's like, "Who is this? What do you want?" That kind of thing. And then eventually, I sent him the script. And then, to my surprise, he read it and he actually liked it a lot. And then all of a sudden, his tune changed. He called me up and then he said, "Hey, do you mind if I show this to some people?" And I was still at film school at NYU. And next thing I know, I'm being flown out to LA, doing the meetings. Everything got kind of crazy. I signed with a big agent, and that kind of just kickstarted everything. So it was that's pretty unusual from what I gather. But that's how I.
It's also pre-ulcer. And then that's how it began. And then he had to deal with those people.
Questions?
Anyone?
Hi. Talking about your guys' upcoming projects, it made me wonder, how do you consider like what projects to tackle, or for Chris Rock, how do you decide what characters to revisit, or what part of that universe you created to revisit, or is it just things you are interested in at the time, or miss, or, you know?
In other words, how does your mind work?
Well, there's a couple of things that motivate me. Part of it is, can I do, you know, I try to do things that I haven't done before if I'm doing a big book. You know, I have this big book, little book kind of thing, where I do a book like The Stupidest Angel with characters I've used before, and I know I can write it fast and so forth. And that might be just motivated because, oh, a Christmas book, people will like that. But then, you know, something like Lamb that's just like, I don't know if anybody can do this. And the same with Fool. It's like, I'm going to take, you know, one of Shakespeare's most dire tragedies and make it into a comedy. And so a lot of times I'm motivated by challenging myself and trying to do things I'm not sure I can do. And then hopefully they will also be entertaining and fun to read too. This art book that I'm doing is because I just like looking at art, and I've been looking at art for years and years and years, and I guess it's my Midwestern upbringing. I said, well, I have to do something with this, and oh yeah, I'll write a book about this. So I decided to write a book about the color blue, which turns out is about as hard as it sounds. But a lot, you know, it's a balance between what I find interesting, what I would like to be able to do with it, and if it's going to challenge me to be able to pull it off. And you know, one of them is going to crash and burn. There's no, you know, one of these days, you guys won't be here, and it'll just be empty seats and me sobbing into a microphone. I look forward to that. But that's how I pick my projects. It's just something that's interesting and will hopefully be interesting to you.
I'm kind of, I think I feel the same. I just wrote a screenplay that I think is a result of having been hired to write other screenplays that I wasn't in love with, which happens a lot when you're a professional screenwriter. You know, you get these jobs and you find ways to fall in love with the material, but it's really not from your heart. And so I just wrote something that's completely from my heart, and I think it's a very meaningful story. So it was really rewarding to be able to just do that, and I'm kind of curious to see the response. I have no idea if it's going to be successful or not, but it's something I had to do as a writer.
Is there a dog?
No.
It's always good to have a dog. It's really different. The amount of I know you guys didn't ask this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. What he does and what I do is so different. In not that, you know, I mean, I think it's probably what steered Ian to novels is the amount of untalented people, the number of untalented people who are going to step on your material when you work in Hollywood is just unbelievable. I mean, there's always some lawyer who has to say something at the meeting, and so he throws something out there that's going to cause you 2 months of work just to fill the silence with, oh shit, it's my turn to talk. And you just, and I have never been able to, and I think almost without exception, get through a meeting in Hollywood without going, well, you're a fucking idiot. And it turns out that is not the way it's done. And basically, I turn in you know, I tell my editor, this is what I'm going to write. She goes, okay. And then I write it and send it in, and she goes, you know, you've got this guy drinking tea on page 227, and he's got coffee on page 228. You might want to change that. And that's it. You guys see it after that. I don't rewrite. That's it. You know. And what Ian does is there is always another person who, for the lack of having something to say at a meeting, will make him rework his script. And I would be so in jail, or you know, because I would have killed someone at a meeting by now if I did what he did. I so admire his tolerance for that process. You know?
I think one of the toughest things about being a screenwriter on the professional level is taking these moronic ideas from these big famous producers and then somehow incorporating them into your work to appease them. Not in the interest of making the story better at all, but somehow it's really about appeasing these egos and yet maintaining the integrity of the story that you started out with. So it's a pretty tough balancing act. I
had a guy who used to run Fox Network. This is the example of what he's talking about, and he was a successful president of the company and sort of got golden parachuted out and got his own production company. And he hired me to develop a TV series, and he wanted to do it from my novel Island of the Secret Love Nun. And he said, but you've got to take the supernatural out because supernatural doesn't sell on television. And I went, didn't you greenlight the X-Files when you were? And he said, well, yeah, I did, but that didn't have humor. I mean, what I mean is supernatural and humor doesn't work. And I go, didn't you greenlight Buffy when you were at Fox? And he said, well, yeah, but contrary to popular belief, that show really didn't do that well. And I said, so if I write a pilot that runs for 7 years and has a spin-off that runs for 5 after that, we won't have done that well? And his answer is, I'm not saying I know anything about TV. And I'm like, well, evidently not. I mean, it was, and that was the this because you're a fucking idiot moment, and so that meeting was over. But that's the sort of thing that Ian deals with every single day. And like I said, I would just be there like he's in the Bronco on the 405 and we're following him with helicopters. He's got a studio executive handcuffed in the back, you know, and it's just as well that I live in the city and write novels. So.
Just out of curiosity, how long have you two known each other?
15 years? Yeah, Ian brought a production company to my book Coyote Blue years ago, in like 1995, I guess, and they optioned the book and he wrote it, and we started talking. We went to Montana and scouted, what do you call them, the locations. It's not my field. And stuff like that. So we've known each other like 15 years now.
I think you've explained nicely why so many bad movies are made from good books.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Sure.
Here,
We can repeat the question if you want to shout.
Would you ever write a novel about a bad movie? Making a bad movie?
You know what? I wouldn't want to have to do the research. I think I'll let Ian. Yeah, I'll let Ian write. Would you write a movie about the process? I mean, a novel about the process.